She hadn't seen her mother in 7 years. The world had changed. The skies grown quieter and the ground colder beneath her feet. But that morning, as she stood over the lifeless body of her calf, swaying in silence and sorrow, something broke in the air, a sound not heard, but felt a vibration in the bones, a breath caught in time. And in that instant, her heart remembered what her mind could not, because grief has no voice, but memory does. And when it calls across years of silence, across miles of emptiness, something buried deep begins to rise. An ache, a pull, a recognition older than pain itself. And as the wind carried that familiar tremble through the trees, her body froze. Her soul cracked open, and everything she had lost, everything she had buried, came, rushing back, not as a ghost, but as a presence, as something real moving toward her, unseen but undeniable. Because some bonds do not die. They wait hidden beneath the noise of survival, waiting for the moment we are too broken to pretend we've forgotten. Every morning she followed the same path down to the waterhole, just as the sun broke the edge of the hills. Her steps steady, her movements precise, as if rehearsed over years. Each one echoing the rhythm of a life she had once known. Long ago she grazed. Slowly, not out of hunger, but habit, pausing now and then to raise her head and scan the horizon for nothing in particular. Yet always searching, her ears would twitch at distant sounds. Her eyes would linger a little too long on certain silhouettes, as though waiting for something unnamed. Something lost in the folds of memory. The herd nearby accepted her presence but kept a gentle distance. They seemed to sense the quiet in her, the silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy. She moved with grace but never joy. She bathed in the shallow river and coated herself in dust. But even then, her motions were restrained, like a song remembered without its melody. Sometimes when she slept, she would wake suddenly. Her breath caught her body still listening, and no one knew why, not even her. Not really, but deep in her bones she carried something unfinished, something unresolved. A memory not of images, but of weight, of warmth, of a touch that once anchored her and was gone. She never trumpeted for no one to hear. She never called out into the open space. But sometimes at dusk, she would pause at the edge of the trees facing west, standing absolutely still, as if she was waiting for the past to catch up, as if somewhere just beyond the light. Someone she had not seen in years might finally be coming home. It happened fast, like storms do. One moment, the air was quiet, thick with heat and dust. The next, it was filled with screams and thunder, not from the sky, but from the earth itself. The sound of panic pounding, hooves shattered branches, and the tearing of something sacred. Her mother had been beside her seconds before, then gone swallowed by the chaos. Shira called once, twice louder, each time her voice breaking open the dark. But there was no answer, only the fading echoes of a herd running for its life, and the sharp snap of silence settling like ash around her. She didn't know what had happened, only that the world no longer made sense. Something enormous had been ripped from her, something warm and sure, and anchoring, and in its place was a hole too wide for sound and too deep for tears. She waited through the night, not moving, not sleeping. Her small frame trembling with every gust of wind, hoping she'd see her mother's shadow rise from the horizon. But morning came, and it didn't. She was found days later, barely standing, her eyes dull, her body thin. She was taken to safety, but the safety was not familiar. The hands that fed her were kind, but wrong. Their touch lacked the language. She knew the language of trunks and breath and quiet songs in the dark. She healed slowly, but something inside her had curled inwards, folded in on itself, like a leaf pressed beneath a stone. She no longer played. She no longer reached out when others approached. She stood, apart from the others, not out of fear, but something colder. Resignation, as if she had accepted that some things once broken are not meant to be whole again. Time passed and the seasons turned, but she did not forget. The absence became part of her, like a shadow always just behind her shoulder. And though she never called out again, not once in all those years, There was a silence inside her that stretched across everything, a silence shaped like a mother's voice, a home never found again, a goodbye that was never spoken. Let me pause here for a moment and ask you, where are you listening from? Have you ever had someone remember you after years apart? Maybe even when you thought they'd forgotten, a person, or even an animal. That quiet moment of recognition, that rush of memory. If stories like this speak to your heart, make sure to follow. There's so much more ahead, and every chapter is written with you in mind. It was just a sound at first, low and distant, not meant for her, not directed at anyone, but it pierced straight through the veil of her grief like light cracking through storm clouds, and something inside her shifted not forward, but backward, a tremble. In her chest she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the sound itself, but what it carried, something buried under years of silence, dusted in memory, and wrapped in the scent of another life. And for a moment she froze as if her own heartbeat was afraid to make a sound, afraid to believe, afraid to want it to be real. Because what if it wasn't? What if it was only a ghost echoing from the places she had locked away? Something deep within her began to stir a storm of questions, unspoken but urgent. Was it possible? Could someone still remember her after all this time? Would they know her? Would they care? Or would they pass by untouched, unaware that the child they lost had waited every day in silence and shadow? She felt torn between the weight of, now, the lifeless calf at her feet, and the unbearable ache of a maybe rising from the trees she had learned to live without reaching. But now her body was moving before her mind could follow her ears, lifted her trunk, rose her breath caught, and in that breath came the sound again, deeper, clearer, filled with sorrow, and something else, something like memory. The brush moved a shape, formed, and in it something too familiar to ignore her instincts, ward with caution. But hope does not ask permission. It simply rises, it dares, it believes. And in that impossible moment she stepped forward, trembling, unsure, because sometimes, even after all the pain, all the silence, there is a part of us that still wants to be found. They moved toward each other slowly, as if time had thickened the air between them every step. Hesitant, every breath caught somewhere between fear and hope, neither fully trusting what their eyes began to see. Two shapes once known, now older, heavier marked by years, but something deeper stirred. Beneath the surface, Shira paused. Her ears flicked, her body tense, ready to retreat. But the other elephant didn't rush, didn't call again, just stood there breathing low and steady. Her presence patient, like the quiet before a storm. Their eyes met, not with certainty, but with recognition blooming at the edges, fragile as morning mist. Then the older one lifted her trunk, not high, not wide, just gently forward, reaching not to claim, but to ask. And Shira stood still as it brushed the side of her face, a gesture so simple yet ancient. And then it happened. A shiver moved through her, a gasp that wasn't sound but soul. The kind of knowing that doesn't come from sight or smell, but from memory. Living in the blood, in the bones, in the heart's oldest corners. Her legs shook, her head dipped, and from somewhere deep within her chest came a sound, raw, aching. A sound only a daughter could make when she's been found after being lost for too long. The older elephant answered with a low rumble, a trembling vibration that wrapped around them like arms, and suddenly the space between them collapsed. They touched again, not cautious now but with urgency, trunks coiling around one another, pressing, pulling, clinging. The way only those who've survived distance can do, the way grief and love collapse into each other when silence finally breaks around them. Shira pressed into her mother's side, and her mother did not move, did not speak, did not need to, because in that contact, everything else fell away. The pain, the years, the questions. They didn't need language. They had memory, and in that clearing beside the body of a child, gone too soon, a mother and daughter became whole again, not as they were, but as they had always been, underneath the silence, underneath the scars, found not by sight, but by something stronger that never stopped calling, even when it had no voice. The first step away from the calf was the hardest. but Shira took it slowly, like learning to breathe again. Her mother moved beside her, not leading, not pushing, just there, solid and quiet and constant. They didn't look back, but they didn't have to. The memory would stay where it belonged, not buried, not denied, but carried. And in the days that followed, something began to shift. It wasn't dramatic. It was in the little things. The way Shira leaned her head gently against her mother's side, when they rested under the trees, the way her ears flicked more freely when the wind passed, the way she allowed herself to lie down fully for the first time in years, letting the earth hold her without fear of waking alone. Her mother too began to change. The weariness in her step softened, the sharpness in her gaze eased. She began to hum low notes like lullabies half forgotten from another life. And once Shira answered not with sound, but with a playful nudge, a moment small but sacred, like the first smile. After mourning, the herd noticed too. They shifted to make space, not just for bodies, but for healing. And soon the two were seen moving together, not as strangers reunited, but as something older than time, a bond reforged and tested by loss, but made stronger for it. And though grief remained, it no longer hollowed them. It shaped them, gave them a rhythm they could walk in together. Pain had written their past, but presence now shaped their future. And in the quiet, when the sun sank low and the world held its breath, they stood close, their shadows touching. Not to forget what had been lost, but to honor it, to carry it, and still choose to move forward. Because healing doesn't always arrive with light. Sometimes it comes in silence, in closeness, in the simple truth that love remembered is love returned. Some bonds do not need words. They live in the spaces between touch and silence, in the memories that never fully fade, even when everything else does, because true connection does not vanish. It lingers quietly beneath the noise, beneath the years, beneath the ache, waiting not to be found but to be felt again. And when it returns, it does not ask questions. It simply becomes a part of you once more. Steady, warm, and whole. They were no longer who they had been, but something deeper, wiser, softened. Not broken by what they had lost. And in finding each other again, they did not erase the pain, they simply made room for it beside the love that had never left. Some reunions don't change the past, but they give it peace. And some moments are not loud, but they echo forever.